This is Fowl Players Radio, your podcast for arts, entertainment, and pop culture. Welcome. My name is Michael Spedden, your host. Every episode features fun, fascinating stories about people in the performing arts, actors, authors, dancers, writers, musicians, athletes, you name it. Folks who are center stage, backstage, on camera, or behind the scenes. Sit back and listen. Let's have some fun. Fowl Players Radio is a proud production of the Fowl Players Group and the official podcast of the Fowl Players of Perryville.
Hi, this is Paul Castiglia, and you're listening to Fowl Players Radio, the one-stop shop for all your pop culture needs.
Hi, this is Bud Becker, and you're listening to Fowl Players Radio.
Hello, this is John Piet,
Kevin Schmidt,
and Jerry Bozick.
And we're August, a little band from Virginia. You can hear our story, other stories from the legendary Baltimore, D.C. music scene, and much, much more with Michael Spedden on Fowl Players Radio. You can find it at www.fowlplayersradio.com, on YouTube, and wherever you find podcasts online. Keep rocking.
Tonight's guest is Ronald MacCloskey. Ronald is one of those kind of guys that you can sort of describe as a Renaissance man. He's done just about everything, so many different things in his career. And in the time we had to talk, it really seemed as if we had just scratched the surface. He's written and produced a movie about Boris Karloff, 2021's Boris Karloff, the man behind the monster. It's going to be released on video on October 18th, 2022. He will be speaking and screening this film at the Black Bear Film Festival on October 14th. He has a documentary series coming to Jewish Life Television called Remembering the Catskills. It debuts on October 29th, and it talks all about the great entertainment heritage from all those old hotels up in the Catskill Mountains. He's also the founder of AddamsFest, a festival that honors Charles Addams and the Addams family in Westfield, New Jersey. It's now in its 5th year. We had a great time talking about these things and many, many others. We also talked a bit about the Sunshine Boys, Jack Benny, Groucho Marx, so many more things. I think you're really going to enjoy our conversation. If you're watching this, you're likely watching this on YouTube, and you can see that I have the greatest face in the world for radio. Here's some exciting news over the next few months. We will be relaunching some of our classic episodes and placing them on our YouTube channel. Remember, Fowl Players Radio can be heard on our main website, www.fowlplayersradio.com, or on just about any platform where podcasts can be found, such as Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, many, many more, as well as on our new YouTube channel. So remember, go to YouTube to see the video versions, and you'll be seeing old episodes popping up there from time to time. No matter where you listen, please remember to hit the subscribe and like buttons and give us a good review. The Fowl Players of Perryville have a few shows left this fall. We will be performing on the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad October 29th, and also on New Year's Eve. Tickets are available at www.wmsr.com. You'll also see us at Fifth Company Brewing. That's a new venue that we're going to be performing at in Perryville, 325 Front Street. We will be there on October 21st, November 12th, and December 10th. So please go to fifthcompanybrewing.com, where you can find out more information on our website, www.fowlplayersofperryville.com. Stick around for Ron MacCloskey.
Hi, this is Kim of Kim's Crypt, and you're listening to Fowl Players Radio.
Hi, everybody. Dwight Weems from Gaz the Fun Band, and you're watching and listening to Fowl Players Radio.
This is A.D. Addams, and you are tuned in to Fowl Players Radio with your host, Michael Spedden.
Yeah, hi, this is David Simmons from DC Star, and I am just encouraging all of you to tune in to Michael Spedden's show on Fowl Players Radio and love the rock and roll of the past and the art of the future.
Folks, welcome back to Fowl Players Radio. Tonight we have a guest who, what can I say? We were just talking before the show, doing our normal pregame. Ronald MacCloskey is here, and he's basically has done everything. You'll hear about everything he's been involved with, and it's amazing. This is going to be a good listen. I'll guarantee you that, folks. Welcome, Ronald. Good to have you tonight, bud.
Thank you so much. I love the title of your show, Fowl Players. And I'm sure you've explained it several times to your audience, but tell me, where did the name come from? What does it mean?
Well, Fowl Players Radio. Okay. My murder mystery group is called the Fowl Players of Perryville.
Okay.
The town I live in, Perryville, Maryland, is on the Susquehanna River. And this area is known for its waterfowl. The waterfowl, we have in our area about a dozen species of ducks, all kinds of herons and eagles, and this area is known. And as a matter of fact, all the towns along the river every year have their own decoy festivals. So we kind of figured, fowl, with it being in the area that it's in, plus foul play for murder. So I decided, how there's Second City and then there's Second City TV. Well, I decided we have the Fowl Players of Perryville. This is Fowl Players Radio.
All right.
And I have interesting guests like yourself. And folks, believe me, wait till Ronald gets going here. All the things you told me about, my jaw was on the floor the whole time we're talking about all the things that he's done here. And we're going to, we're going to talk about a heck of a lot of things. But, Fowl Players Radio is, I plug my murder mystery shows on this show here. So when people listen, they get to hear the dates. And that's the only sponsor I have right now is myself.
When I first heard your title, I thought it was about baseball.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
And your players, but that's great. Oh, that's really, radio's so wonderful. And I had the chance to talk to cousin Brucey a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's so intimate radio because
Mm-hmm.
people, they listen to it by themselves. Sometimes they're in their bedroom, they're outside or whatever. And it's so special. And I've always loved radio, and thank God it's still around. And thank God there's shows like you where people can then just sit and turn it on and just relax and just listen to people talk.
Thanks. And I try to keep it interesting with the reason I started the show years ago was because in this area, I started off, I'm more of an actor now, but I'm originally a musician. And I played, in this area for nearly 30 years, 30 years. And there were so many bands that were from this area here, DC Star, Kicks, The Ravens, Face Dancer, Child's Play, Mystic Force, that in this area, Maryland, Baltimore, DC, PA, Northern Virginia region, you may not have known them outside of here very well, but in this area, these guys were like the Rolling Stones. Plus we've had people who are shows like The Wire. We've had Homicide, The Wire, The Corner, the show with Kevin Spacey, the Veep, not the Veep, but then also it's escaping me, the show that he was on about Washington.
House of Cards.
House of Cards, exactly. So we've had a lot of that and a lot of other history here. And I wanted to try to capture these stories. And not to say that people are getting older, you don't ever want to bring that up, but how many times have you ever thought to yourself, man, I wish I would have recorded my grandfather telling those stories or my parents telling those stories, to have them archived for people to hear? Because there is a great history in this area here. And then I've expanded out. I've met, Paul Castiglia, who happened to introduce, us. We've had people from Broadway, people from Hollywood. I've met some publicists. I've met a lot of other people, and I just love listening to backstories about, how did you get from point A to where you are now, and what was your journey, or your, that's a big buzzword nowadays, your journey, but your story. How did you get from point A to point B? And I love listening to these things. I like listening to podcasts that talk about it, and I like, bringing on guests from this area here, because there's a lot to be told in this area. I played the scene, I know.
I agree with you. And I had an idea years ago that I tried to get off the ground, and you are more than welcome to take this idea and run with it. Okay. Mm-hmm. I believe that every single person has a PhD And for me, a PhD is a personal history day.
Mm-hmm.
There's one day in their life that for some reason they remember forever. But coincidentally, that day also became a day in history. So, for example, let's say you have a guy who says, yeah, I remember I met my wife. We went to the movies, and it was a wonderful summer evening, and we came home and we heard this song playing, and I'll never forget that day. It's so special to me. Oh, and by the way, it was December 7th. So
Oh.
again, it's kind of cool to hear a person just tell their own personal story, and then it coincided with the day in history.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
Sure,
great.
sure.
Great to again, you'd have to somehow interview hundreds of people to
Mm-hmm.
make that happen. But like I said, everyone has a special day, and I'm sure you do too. A day that you remember forever and ever.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. We do. Yeah, everybody has that, I think. That would definitely make for some interesting conversation, I believe.
Yeah.
So you have coming up this month in your town, you have AddamsFest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about that, because I love I've seen a number of the Charles Addams cartoons, not necessarily the ones dealing with the Addams family,
Right.
but they're very clever, and he's got a lot of history. He's a New Jerseyan, or a New Jerseyite, is it?
No, I don't know. New Jerseyan, I think, is the proper word.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Charles Addams, when I was a kid growing up, I grew up in Westfield, New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
and I started, I really wanted to be a cartoonist first. I
Mhm.
loved Charlie Brown and all that stuff, and I did the cartoons in the high school newspaper. And I had heard, it's kind of like it was like a rumor that Charles Addams grew up here, but I never saw anything that honored that. So as years went by, it really took until 1991 when the major motion picture came out with Raul Julia and Angelica Houston. I went to the township. I said, we're going to do anything to honor this guy? They said, no. I said, well, come on, we got to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So on my own, I went out, I founded the Charles Addams Art Scholarship, where we give out money every year to a student majoring in art. And I also had his house declared a historic landmark, where there's now a plaque on the house that says. And for about 15, 20 years, Michael, I did this all on my own. Nobody helped me at all.
Sure.
Every year I would come up with something different. Well, 5 years ago, a new mayor was elected. I went to go see her, and I said, we've got to do something about Charles Addams. And she said, it's funny because just a week ago, I was reading about this small town in Pennsylvania. Nobody knew about it. But in this town, the theater was used in the making of the movie The Blob.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so they decided to have a Blob Fest. And every year now, they talk about that movie, and everybody comes, and it's a 3-day festival. So she says, I agree, let's do the Addams Fest. And that's how it started 5 years ago. So it's really big and huge. It's great. Almost all the shop owners, they paint their windows. They have a costume contest. Usually the show, one of the TV shows at the theater, the local theater. And it's great. It's finally Addams is getting his due. And people are talking about that connection between Charles Addams, the Addams family, and Westfield, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of the Addams family, has anybody from the actual family of Addams come to you and giving you any feedback or any praise or anything about the festival?
Well, Charles Addams was an only child.
Okay.
And no relatives. So technically, there are no more Addams.
Oh, okay.
But there were certain things left behind in town that I like to believe Charles Addams had a way of doing that on purpose. For example, phone numbers. When I grew up in town, everybody had the same type of phone numbers, being 232 or 233.
Sure, right.
Alphabetically, if you remember the old style, people, when they would say their phone numbers, they'd say like Murray Hill 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, in Westfield, it was Addams 2 or Addams 3.
Oh, sure.
So I like to think that Charles Addams will always be remembered because his name is in the phone numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then when he was a little kid, there was a clubhouse that he used to meet with his friends. And there was a room upstairs, and in this room was the clubhouse. And on the wall was a skeleton, almost a life-size skeleton made out of pencil and chalk. And that's attributed to Charles Addams. So we cut that out of the wall. It's now preserved under glass. and that's a part of the AddamsFest.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Interesting.
And
So,
I've had a chance to meet some of the members of the Addams Family TV show. So I've met
Mhm.
Lisa Loring, who played
Mhm.
Wednesday,
yeah.
and I also had a chance to meet John Astin.
Oh,
And John Astin is in your neighborhood. Did you know that?
I've been chasing him down for the last 3 years. I've not gotten a response. So,
He teaches drama at Johns Hopkins University.
oh yeah, I know the neighborhood he lives in, and I know the corridor of Baltimore City that he lives in. And that's his alma mater too. He grew up here in Baltimore, in the city of Baltimore. And he came back because he felt a duty to his craft to have somebody with his experience come back and share it, which I think is just really admirable.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I'll come down. Me and you we'll leave at midnight. We should leave
Mhm.
before. We'll get our flashlights, and we'll go knocking on his door. We'll wake him up.
Okay, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure that would be popular, huh? Yep.
Yeah.
But that reminds me of a tradition that I'm sure you've probably heard of this. In the Baltimore area, Poe's grave
Yes.
is here, and for years, a person would come to Poe's grave.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember if it was on his birthday, on his death day, or on Halloween.
Right.
But on one of those times, a cloaked person, would come in and put a bottle of, I guess it was maybe cognac,
Right.
or something on his do a toast,
Yeah.
and leave the bottle there. And the caretaker would always watch him, but he always insisted that nobody bother or disrupt this person, that they let him come. You could watch, but let them come and go, and don't say anything or bother them when they come in. And then I don't know if the person is passed away or not. The tradition stopped a number of years ago, but
The mystery about it, because I had heard that story, and the mystery that I also love that somebody attached to it is they weren't too sure whether it was a man or a woman.
that's true. That's
But
true. I've heard that as well.
They had the coat, they had the hat, and whatever. But yeah, that's just a great, interesting story. And
Mhm.
for a while there used to be a one-man show on Edgar
Yes.
Allan Poe, and
Mhm.
on occasion John Astin would do it.
Yes, he would.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, he would. I've known that he's done Poe before.
Yeah.
Down here. So what are some of the other activities? It looks like I was looking through the website for the Addams Fest. What are some of the activities that you have? I know seems like there's an activity or something just about every day through October.
Well, yeah, but they try to focus it on the last weekend of October. But yeah, they have spread it out, and they try to do different things. They try to have things for children. They try to have things for adults. In fact, they have I think it's called Gomez's beer garden. So
Okay. Hey.
so you can go out there and drink some beer. And I'll tell you a very ironic story about me and then what happened with Addams is my mom worked for 25 years for a company in Westfield, New Jersey called Pearsall and Frankenbach.
Mhm.
They were located at a building, 114 Elm Street. And it
Okay.
was a completely isolated building all by itself. And I used to remember as a kid, sometimes I'd walk around town and then I'd get tired. My mom would get off at 5 o'clock. So I'd always go to her building, wait for her, and then her friend would drive us both home. So I remember distinctly going to that building, and in a way that building paid for my clothes, for my food, everything. Believe it or not, that building today is now the Addams Tavern.
Is that right? Is that right?
So that's been converted into the Addams Tavern. They honor Charles Addams, and it's a great place. It's a great place to be. And of course, they're involved with the beer garden and all the Addams family stuff. But I just found that so ironic that that's what happened.
It really seems like the Addams family, it was popular in the 60s, and I believe there were some almost like the Munsters, like the Addams Family Returns, like a few specials over the years. Then they had the actual movie with Raul Julia and Angelica Houston and the girl Richie,
Yeah,
Christina
Ritchie. And
Ritchie.
she's from Montclair, New Jersey.
Oh, right. And then they've had the live action ones, and I have a niece who is 13, And her generation loves those.
Right.
Her generation absolutely loves those. And actually, a number, I guess about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, she was Wednesday for Halloween.
Right.
And she actually went right into the character. She wouldn't smile. She was just very, gloomy and very, straightforward. And so I went out and bought her the Addams Family DVD set.
Oh, that's great.
And she liked it. And
great. Well, I'll tell you what,
mm-hmm.
Another version, maybe you are talking about it, but the other one that I just absolutely loved was the Addams Family, the musical. With,
okay.
Nathan Lane and with Bebe Neuwirth.
Mm-hmm.
And that, believe it or not, and I'm not making this up, that play now is the most repeated play in the history of high school dramas.
Okay.
Almost every year, a high school somewhere in this country does the Addams Family, the musical.
I saw a version of that in community theater in Maryland.
Okay. Right.
It was at Milburn Stone Theater, not far from me. It's in Northeast Maryland. It's part of Cecil College, and they have a really nice theater there. And they did, oh gosh, I tell you, that was popular for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I guess maybe once it closes on Broadway, it gets released so community theaters can do it.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, sometimes that's where they make all their money back.
Right, exactly.
Has to pay the rights. And here's another thing about the Addams Family. I don't know if you like pinball machines, but very soon after the film came out, they did a pinball machine.
Is that right?
Most popular pinball game of all time.
Wow.
And it was an amazing game. Next time you go into an arcade, if you can find it, play it. It's a great game.
Wow, is that right? Yeah. I think that was in the 70s, seemed to be a time for, I remember seeing Kiss pinball machines. Yeah. But then again, if it was up to Gene Simmons, I mean, I think the Kiss logo would be on everything from milk to your car. They were making Kiss coffins a few years ago. And I guess any way he could figure to get that out there, like nobody's heard of Kiss, right?
Right. Like I remembered in the late 70s, 80s, I used to say to friends of mine, I said, what happened to all our TV series that we used to love? Gilligan's Island and Get Smart and all this stuff. And then I walked into a casino in Atlantic City and I found where they went. They're all pinball machines.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Every TV show, every movie has their own pinball machine.
And it's nice to see a lot of those having a resurgence now too, because I love Antenna TV and TV.
Right. Yep.
And recently, a couple of other stations like that have popped up. I can't recall the names off the top of my head because I've just noticed them in the last couple of weeks. But there's something to be said about that old TV. You could sit down just like you could back then with the entire family and watch it and not have to worry about something crazy coming on that may not be appropriate for children or something. And you know what I mean?
Well, you're right. And there are good things and bad things about that. So I'll tell you the good thing. The good thing is like maybe a TV show like The Saint that you hadn't seen in years. Now all of a sudden you can see it. The bad thing is when they play it every single day and he's going from Tokyo to Paris to Berlin, whatever, he's staying in the same apartment. It's the same all over the world. And you realize, well, every week you didn't notice it.
Sure.
And you memorize lines, you remember the theme song. And then the same warehouse where he beats up the bad guy, that's the same warehouse. And those boxes come tumbling down. And after a while, it's funny to see all that stuff.
It sure is. But it's great to watch them again too. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy having an option where you can turn that on and see it. And it was just because that was the stuff.
What I loved doing is watching, and even the westerns, because it's a while. It's like every channel had western. Is to watch these famous movie stars that were starting out in their career and playing the bad guy or playing the third guy from the left or whatever, and then they became huge stars. So it's great to see them on TV, episodes of The Twilight Zone and everything. So it's great.
Oh yeah, those are just excellent. I've seen a number of shows. I think I was watching one of the oldies stations, and in one day I saw a young Bill Bixby in like 4 different shows.
Wow, yeah.
That girl, Andy Griffith, and I can't remember what the other ones were, but
Right.
it was just, I was like, wow, it must be Bill Bixby Day or something, when he was probably very young. But it was before My Favorite Martian, you know.
Well, I'll tell you what, I love the fact that you not only can watch these shows, and I'll take My Favorite Martian as an example. You
Mhm.
can not only watch the old shows, but you can actually go to season 1, episode 1.
You can on
And yeah,
Tubi and other ones,
but
yeah.
then you forget, how did it start? You know, what
Mhm.
was the first episode? So yeah, I just watched My Favorite Martian, the first episode a couple months ago.
Mhm.
Here's one thing though, I had heard about Bill Bixby towards the end of his life, which I felt really bad for, because of the Incredible Hulk.
Mhm.
It was just so popular, and he became almost like Elvis. He was a prisoner in his house. He couldn't go anywhere. Everybody recognized him. Everybody bothered
Right.
him, and it became a real negative for him.
Mhm.
But and that's sad to see, because when you're an actor, all you want to do is work. You know,
Mhm.
the more work you get, the more famous you get. The more famous you get, the more people know you. But unfortunately, he had become a prisoner towards the end of his life.
Wow. Wow. That's a real shame. That's a real shame, because
Yeah.
he was so good too. And you know, both he and Michael Landon, you know, were both
Yep.
taken way too young, you know,
Yeah.
taken way too young. It's just a real shame.
Well,
S-
Michael Landon, I admire, because Michael Landon really had the foresight to just keep going and make
Mhm.
another show and another show and another show. You know, he did Little House on the Prairie, he did Highway to
Mhm.
Heaven, and you're right. I mean, he died when he was going strong. He could have continued much more and do it at least one or more TV series.
Mhm. Oh, easily, easily,
Yeah.
easily. Yeah, yeah. Let's see here. I wanted to ask a little bit more. We were talking a little bit about the Catskills.
Yeah.
You had mentioned, you know, that's something that I really enjoy talking about and hearing stories about. I've had a couple of people as guests that worked there,
Yeah.
did some entertaining there towards the end in the later 70s, when it was really starting to, you know, not, you know, when it was really starting to go into decline.
Right.
I've had a couple of other guests that did not work there. They worked there, but not in a show business capacity.
Yeah.
But this was just, I mean, I've read books about the Catskills. I've seen documentaries about the Catskills. And I mean, the stories and the legends from these hotels and the way they started, you know, just so humbly, and became such a big thing and launched the careers of so many people.
Right.
You had done. Tell us about your experience with, you know, the Catskills. You were
Yeah.
talking to me about a few things.
Well, one of the things I pride myself on is I'm like a lot of people where I have hobbies or I have interests.
Hmm.
And you know, and you either follow it or you go along with it, whatever. But I also then am very proactive,
Hmm.
meaning, okay, if I know about something and I know that I can actually go there, why not go there? You know, why
Hmm.
not see if you can work there? So that's what I did. When I grew up in the early 70s as a teenager, I used to
Hmm.
watch all the talk shows that are no longer around. Merv
Right.
Griffin, Mike Douglas, and Johnny
Hmm.
Carson. And almost every single comedian came on that made me laugh. When the guy said, "Where'd you start?" They all said the Catskills.
Hmm.
Now, I had no clue where the Catskills were. I thought it was like a mythical place like Camelot.
Yeah.
I knew somewhere, but I didn't. So I walked into a deli one day and I asked the guy behind the counter, can you tell me where it is? He took a placemat, turned it over, and in pencil, he drew me a map. When I had to get from Westfield to the Catskills. So one day in April, my senior year of high school, I drove up there all by myself. I brought a little resume and all that stuff, and I went to like 4 or 5 hotels. And I said, you know, I really would like to work up here. And I don't care what I do. I just want to work. And they were very nice. They nodded and said, okay, we'll call you. Don't call us. And then as I'm driving back, all of a sudden I see a huge, big billboard with Jerry Lewis's face on it that says Brown's Hotel, my favorite resort. I said, well, if I'm going to work anywhere, I got to work at Brown's. So I pulled over. I went in just like I did with all the other hotels. Talked to a guy named Roger Brooks. I just said, I just want to work up there. He says, okay, hold on. He left for a couple minutes. He came back. He said, "Follow me." We walked through the back office to this office to that. All of a sudden, I'm standing in Lillian Brown's office. Lillian Brown, who owned the hotel. Jerry Lewis's picture all over the wall. She asked me a couple questions and just looked at Roger and said, "Roger, what do you think?" And he just said, "Oh, okay, I think he'll be good." That was it. I was hired on the spot. I came back the last weekend of June. I ended up getting the best job anybody could get that wanted to be in show business. Means I was a teen counselor.
Oh.
So here was my job. You ready for my job? Eat in the main dining room, play sports all day, dance with girls all night, and go to the nightclub and watch the show.
Oh, man. Where do I sign up?
That was my job. And it was an education for me. It really was. I mean, come on. Shecky Green and Jackie Mason, Henny Youngman, Alan Dean, Jack Carter. I mean, just on and on and on. I got to see all these guys. And the education was not seeing them once, but seeing them several times and seeing how they react to the crowd and seeing how they told that joke. And then, of course, every summer, Jerry Lewis came up. So I was in heaven. It was just great.
Yeah. It seems like these entertainers, all these names and all the other ones, it seems like that was almost a place like home for them because, they started there. And no matter how big they became, because I'm sure by the time you were a teenager up there, these fellows were probably well into their 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
It seems like they always had a tie and they always seemed to remember where they came from by going back and performing there like they did. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, the thing that I think was wonderful about the Catskills is that they were a very tough audience. You really had to make them laugh. So in a way, these comedians were really testing out their material and knew if they got a laugh in the Catskills, they're going to get a laugh in Vegas or other places.
Sure.
Some people said, "What happened to the Catskills? Why did it die?" And I used to tell people it didn't die. It went out to sea, meaning that's what happened with the cruise industry.
Oh,
all those
great.
people, I mean, the food, the entertainment, and everything, it's what you do on a cruise ship.
Oh, okay.
It's been duplicated, but now it's on the ocean. And that's what these entertainers did. They all went out and they performed on the cruise ships after the hotel started closing down.
Okay. I had heard that, and I'd heard a number of other things that were reasons in some of the documentaries I've seen, but that was one of them that was given.
Right.
That the cruise industry came in. Another one was that, people were moving to other parts of the country that would, be the normal clientele there. A lot of the folks, were moving from New York to Florida or New York to Los Angeles.
Right.
But I got to tell you, it's, there is still, it's still a beautiful piece of country out there, regardless of the resorts being there or not. Because Woodstock is out there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a great place to tour if you've ever had the opportunity.
Oh, airfare got cheaper. The younger generation, they wanted to travel other places. So that's what they did. And they didn't follow in their parents' footsteps as far as going up there. So, so things changed. And I mean, for years, when I was up there, they all counted on and was hoping for the casinos to come up there.
Oh, certainly.
But it never did. And so, a lot of these places, they went out of business. They tried to convert to condominiums, and that didn't work. But that physical area, that weather, those mountains, it's still there. It's still there. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place.
It was a place my grandparents loved. I think I'd mentioned to you when we were talking before the episode, my grandfather had performed at Grossinger's as a member of the Chorus of the Chesapeake. The Chorus of the Chesapeake at the time was about 150-man a cappella barbershop chorus. Among the alumni is Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs. He was part of it and I sing with them now too, when I can. I do a couple of shows a year with them, and I just love it. They would perform. They had a lot of their conventions at Grossinger's, and then they would also go back to do other performances there, and they have a certificate. I have a copy. I'm sure a bunch of copies went out to all the men of them being in the Grossinger's Hall of Fame. And my grandparents loved going to Grossinger's so much for the conferences and the conventions and the competitions. They would go back on their own
Yeah.
and absolutely loved it up there. And you know, something that makes me kind of ill, which maybe I was at Gross Singers, or maybe I used to vacation in the Catskills in a past life or something.
Yeah.
But have you ever gone online and seen the ruins of these hotels and the people that have just gone in and trashed them and spray painted everywhere? That just hit me right here, even though I had never been to any of them. I had never vacationed there. I had no memories or ties to it.
Right.
But just to see something that meant so much to so many people just trashed like that.
Yeah, I know that is sad. And the same thing with Brown's Hotel. There was a fence completely all around it. Unfortunately, it caught fire, I think, in the late 90s, and it was destroyed. There was a woman photographer. I can't recall her name at this time, but she put out a book, and she went to every hotel and filmed what these hotels look like today. And it is sad. It's like looking at a cemetery of all those long gone days. But the positive side is, things are coming back little by little. There are resorts up there that are doing quite well. I think I told you about a man that went to the Nevele as a child, and he now wants to come back and redo it and reopen it. By the way, do you know how the Nevele got its name?
No, I don't.
11 school teachers used to picnic there all the time and say, wow, this is such a lovely place. We ought to build a hotel. So those 11 teachers built the hotel. And if you take the word 11 and spell it backwards, it's the Nevele.
Oh, okay. Okay. That makes, hey, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, there you go.
That's great. But when I drove through there, and my wife and I went around and saw a lot of the abandoned, we couldn't drive in, but we were able to drive up like to the fence. You could kind of go into some of the access roads and just stop and look a little bit through the fence, but you see all these little bungalows where people would, take rowboats out and fish and swim.
Right.
And I was looking at this and I was like, wow, what an amazing place to vacation. It reminded me of a lot of the places in Western Maryland my parents used to take me.
Right.
But it would be nice if something else could be done up there. I would hate to see it just rot and decay, but
right.
I mean, it looks like some people are, have some plans out that way, which is nice.
Well, let me tell you, listeners, that I have signed a deal with JLTV, which is Jewish Life Television. They have 50 million viewers. And we have taped 10 episodes of a show called Remembering the Catskills. And the very first episode will be Saturday, October 29th at 10:30 p.m. So they can tune in to JLTV. They will see my first guest, Mark Rieger, and he talks all about the mountains. I've had people also like Elaine Grossinger, who's the daughter of Jenny Grossinger. I have cousin Lucy on as a guest, and it's great. The stories are just so wonderful. And it does bring back the heyday. We show old photos and old movies and whatever. And it's great to hear these people talk about it. And here's the most important part, which is really exciting. There's an actual institution called the Catskill Resort Museum.
I was going to ask about that because I've seen them on Facebook.
Yep. And they have a building now in Ellenville.
Okay.
And the goal is to open it up in 2024. So in 2 short years, there should be a museum that has lots of memorabilia. My show will be running there on a regular basis. And once in a while, we'll actually be able to bring back some of the old acts and perform. Ellenville, I didn't know this about Ellenville. Ellenville had to be, I don't know how big it is, but it seemed like there's at least a dozen hotels attributed to being in Ellenville. Now, I don't know how that's possible, 12 hotels, but it's like everywhere you go, you find out, oh, that was Ellenville, that was Ellenville. Anyway, so Ellenville is where it's going to be, and it's great that this is happening, and I'm working in conjunction with them.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Does I'm guessing a JLT, Jewish Life TV, is that a cable TV channel?
Yes. Yeah, it's almost I believe it's almost on every single cable system.
I think we have it. I have Breezeline up here in Cecil County, Maryland. And I do remember seeing it on there from time to time. I think because they play the Jack Benny show a lot. But
Yep. That's that, and they also play You Bet Your Life, and they play the Jack Benny program.
Okay.
But again, Michael, everything now is on the internet anyway. So if you just go on the internet, JLTV, you'll be able to find it. And again, your viewers would be able to see it.
Wonderful. So that's good because I'd love to see this show. I mean, believe me,
Yeah.
I've got my popcorn ready now. Okay, and like I just love that history. I've loved the Kutchers documentary. I'm sure you've seen that. That was funny. I like how they had Wilt Chamberlain as a porter, and he would just hand the bags up to the second floor from outside the window.
Well,
That's another one.
But you bring up a great point. I mean, the athletes and the sports that went on in the Catskills, people don't even realize. I mean, you had not only basketball players, but football players, and you had boxers. I mean, the boxers were red. Rocky Marciano. I mean, his place was Grossinger's. And it went all the way up to Muhammad Ali, where these boxers would come up and work out, getting ready for a fight at these major hotels. And of course, everyone would want to go and see them. And basketball, I mean, hotel after hotel would play each other in basketball. I was fortunate enough at the time I was up there that softball was the big deal. And hotels used to play each other in softball games. And one game, somebody fell out and they said, Ron, do you want to join? And I just had the time of my life. It was so great being asked. Because again, I'm a team counselor. What am I doing? This was the athletic staff and the athletes. But they allowed me to play in the game, and it was great. Great experience.
Wonderful, wonderful. You were also talking too a bit about Groucho.
Yeah. Well, Groucho was he really was a legend. He did so many things. I ended up writing a show about his life. I called it Groucho, a comic in 3 acts, and he did have a perfect 3-act life because he was on stage in Broadway, then he was in film in Hollywood, and then he was on television. So it really was perfect the way his career went. The other brothers, unfortunately, couldn't make that transition. I mean, for Harpo alone, you know, he didn't speak. So what else are you going to do? Chico started, believe it or not, a big band. So in the 40s, Chico Marx had his own big band, and they would go out. And he was an amazing piano player.
Oh, God, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, well, they were all talented. They all played, I think Groucho played the guitar.
Yes.
But they were all just wonderful musicians and just funny people. And here's an interesting note. When they wanted to do a play, they were blackballed from New York for a while because they didn't get permission to do some type of show. So they were forced to go to Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, they wrote a show, and they had this very dignified older millionaire woman, and they wanted to give her a name. Well, if it was in New York and somebody big and rich, they would have used Rockefeller or you know, whatever else. But since they were in Philly, they used Rittenhouse.
Oh, okay.
And that's why Margaret Dumont to this day is known as Mrs. Rittenhouse.
Is that right?
Because Rittenhouse was much more popular in Philly than anywhere else.
Yeah, that's something. We were both talking, so I guess we do kind of have an acquaintance in common, Steve Stoliar.
Yes.
I had him as a guest about 2 years ago to talk about Raised Eyebrows, which is in the process of becoming a movie.
Right.
But I mean, just imagine having that job where, you know, you get to go to your hero's house, and, you know, if you read the book or if you heard the story, you know, there was a little friction at first with Groucho kind of getting used to him.
Right.
But I mean, he was allowed to eat lunch, and George Burns would come over and he'd be eating lunch and listening to the two of them talking about vaudeville theaters they performed in 1912.
Right.
I mean, I can't think of anything better I'd love to listen to while eating lunch. And
I'll tell you a brand new program that is coming out or is out now. But real briefly, I'll tell you, when George S. Kaufman died in New York City, Groucho went to the funeral. And as he's walking out, he runs into this young comedian named Dick Cavett.
Yes.
And Dick Cavett says, "Can I please walk with you as, you know, we're doing?" So he did. And every time Groucho went to past the doorman, he would say, like, you know, I don't care what you're doing. Get out of here. And he used to tell people. And he said Groucho's the only one that could have done that. And then, of course, eventually they became very close friends, as Woody Allen, Dick Cavett, and Groucho. And then Groucho ended up appearing on Dick Cavett's show.
Oh, quite a bit.
They're just releasing a special called Groucho on Cavett.
Oh,
all
okay.
the old TV shows where Groucho was on, and they put it together as a documentary. It could be on PBS within the next couple of weeks.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I have to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah. And another guy was David Steinberg. David Steinberg was also very close to Groucho as well. and he was a wonderful comedian.
Right. And Bill Cosby really admired him too.
Yes. Nope. You're absolutely right. In fact, Bill Cosby came back. I don't know if you remember this or not, but Bill Cosby actually tried to recreate You Bet Your Life.
He did. He did
And
a
he-
number of years ago. Right.
It wasn't very successful, but I'll tell you what, though, and I know there's so much controversy about Bill Cosby.
Mhm.
Bill Cosby came back with another show, say kids say the darndest things.
Yeah, that was Art Linkletter, I believe.
Exactly. He
right?
did it
Mhm.
first. And I'm telling you, Michael, this man is so wonderful. He never went for the joke. He never tried to outshine the child. He
Mhm.
just let the child speak. And I used to cry laughing so much. I mean, he was a brilliant, brilliant comedian.
Mhm.
Really was.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I definitely agree with you. I definitely agree with you. And the thing is that I'm thinking too, kind of tying into Groucho talking about George Burns and then thinking about the Catskills and how they all started and everything. All these entertainers, achieved all these great heights and everything. And I was reading, I was watching a couple of other documentaries about, Jewish immigration around, the late 1800s, early 1900s. A lot of these guys were like one generation away from Fiddler on the Roof,
Yeah.
living in these little towns in Poland and Russia.
Right.
And, a lot of them coming over as children, Jack Benny, parents are from Poland.
Right.
Burns, Birnbaum came from Russia.
Yeah.
And they were living, in these little towns like that. And then all of a sudden they're here, and it's just amazing, what they were able to accomplish in the time coming here. And it's such great odds.
No, you're absolutely right. And the thing that I really admire is they were able to go from one form of entertainment to another.
Yes.
So, for example, some actually were in vaudeville.
Mhm.
They say the thing that killed vaudeville was radio. Then they say the thing that killed radio was television.
Yeah.
And let's go back to George Burns. He did all of it. He
Mhm.
did vaudeville and radio and television.
Yep.
And it's so unique for me that some comedians excelled much more in one than other, like Jack Benny.
Mhm.
Jack Benny was so successful in radio, and yet he didn't have a film career.
Right.
George
Right.
Burns was successful in radio and TV, but didn't have a film career until he was like in his 80s. Then
As a matter of fact, you're right. As a matter of fact, the Sunshine Boys, that was just one of I was watching that on Turner Classic Movies the other day.
Right.
That was actually supposed to be Benny.
He actually signed for it and started rehearsing before he died.
Yeah, he got sick, and then he recommended Burns.
Yeah.
Burns was the only person who could make him break character and laugh. And that was a great, it turned out to work well. It was almost like Jack Benny willed him something by giving him that part in the movie, because his career really did take off after that. You're right.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, just again, by the grace of God, I somehow was involved with the grand opening of the Sunshine Boys at Radio City Music Hall. One of the guys in PR said it would be fun to have an actual vaudeville show before the movie.
Yeah.
So everybody tried out, and somehow I wangled my way in there. I said, well, I'm going to be the act that everybody hates, the act that bombs. So I was all excited to be on the stage at Radio City, and it was across the street. We were outside on the street doing the show, and of course George Burns and Walter Matthau, they were in the theater, and they had drinks in the dressing room, whatever. But so I was involved in that show, and the nice thing is Ray Stark, who was the producer of the film, took a full page ad out the next day. And it actually said, "Thanks for putting show back in show business," and listed everyone involved. And my name is there with George Burns and Walter Matthau. So
Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah.
That was such a great movie. And the thing is that, I always, send that clip to my manager.
Oh, okay.
Because especially when he's doing the audition at the very beginning with Howard Hessman and Archie Hahn.
Right.
And he shows up a half an hour late.
Yeah.
And I always send that to my manager, and I say, send this out to the rest of us, the rest of us here at the agency, just to remind us how not to audition. And But he was only like 52 years old when he made that movie too. I mean, they really made him up to look older.
Yeah, no,
I think.
Walter Matthau was a great actor. And here's the other thing too: we'd be very sad if we did not mention that the film and the play was written by Neil Simon.
Yes, yes.
Another wonderful writer, and also, it was involved with the Catskills, and then worked for Sid Caesar and all that stuff. And wrote all these great films.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, there's just that that great connection there. Neil Simon is just another. I've loved so many of his movies, and unfortunately, I hadn't seen a lot of his plays,
right,
like on Broadway or anything. But I have seen quite a few of the movie adaptations of his plays. I mean, he's just tremendous, absolutely tremendous. Just an institution right there. Yeah, that was a. I love what they call the Eugene trilogy.
Oh, right, okay, yeah,
right, and I think a lot launched or was pretty instrumental in launching the careers of Matthew Broderick and Jonathan Silverman, I believe. Is that correct?
Well, I think Matthew more than anybody else.
Yeah.
But to really think, when Matthew first started out, if you said someday you're going to be a Broadway musical star,
yeah.
Again, I had the good chance to see him and Nathan Lane and the producers, and oh boy, what a show! So great, and he was wonderful. He was wonderful. But yeah, Matthew Broderick, that really helped him a lot.
Yes, and I believe Jonathan Silverman too, because I believe when Matthew Broderick moved on, I believe they bought him in, if I'm not mistaken. I might be.
I think you're right.
I think so.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you again. You have another big announcement. You are just so full of great stuff, man. I could.
Thanks.
This could be a TV. You could be a TV show, for crying out loud.
We should already.
Let's do it. Let's do it. You definitely. I'd like to ask you about your Boris Karloff project.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've had, we talked, we have another friend in common, Greg Mank.
Yeah.
Who I've known for many years, as have you.
Right.
So tell us about this, Boris Karloff. Just what an amazing, another, acting institution,
When I was 7 years old, I got my first Frankenstein model, and I just fell in love with it. And you got to realize, back in the early 60s, you had three things going on all at once. You had the models in the toy stores. You had Famous Monsters of Filmland, a magazine on the newsstands. And then you had all the movies late at night. Now, for us, I grew up in the New York area. They actually had a host, and that host was John Zackerly. And Zackerly was my guy. He was, I think, in Baltimore. They had somebody else?
They had Ghost Host.
Okay.
And he was also Captain Chesapeake on WBFF 45.
Okay.
And then we also had we would get the DC UHF stations. That was Captain 20.
Oh,
who was Dick Dizelle, who was also Count Gore Duvall.
Okay.
So we had those two. Then they had I've had Dick Dizelle as a guest. I've had the daughter of Captain Chesapeake.
Oh, nice.
As a guest, and he passed away, I guess, about 20 years ago.
Right.
And then I've also had a fellow who was in a band around here, one of my recent episodes, who actually was one of the producers. Picture a real life version of Weird Al Yankovic's UHF.
Oh, all right. Okay.
That's what these two stations were like, because they had just started. They were not affiliated with any network. They were just UHF stations. And it was up to people that worked there, a small skeleton crew, to come up with not only the programming that was on there, Captain Chesapeake, Captain 20, Count Gore Duvall, Ghost Host Theater, but they produced a lot of the people would come to them and say, I need a commercial. And they would make the commercials. And I won't go down that rabbit hole here because I want to respect your time, but there are some legendary Baltimore commercials out there that were just that people still talk about to this day, nearly 50 years later.
Oh, wow.
That were locally produced here. So but Boris, getting back to Boris Karloff, and one thing I've noticed about him was that there's, there was, the law. I think Boris or Bela Lugosi Jr. was involved, as well as maybe Sarah Karloff.
Mhm.
The likenesses of their fathers, because Bella's voice, his accent,
Right.
and a lot of the look that Boris Karloff had. When people make Frankensteins and Draculas or refer to them, even in cartoons or anything, that's a big part of it right there. It was, I would say, Bella's accent, Lugosi's expression, especially the eyes, I think really made him perfect
Yeah.
to play that monster. And again, that's something that those families are I guess kind of getting royalties over now. But talk about that a bit, because I mean, Karloff had a rough career for a long time, and he struggled.
Right. Well,
And,
let's talk about.
I'll turn it over to you.
Right. Let's talk about those three actors in particular, and I'll leave Karloff for last. But let's talk about Lugosi.
Mm-hmm.
He was so wonderful in what he did with Dracula. A lot of people don't realize he's the same actor that played Igor in The Son of Frankenstein. And I believe Igor is one of the all-time great villains in horror movies ever done. He's not given enough credit. Lon Chaney Jr., I mean, he was the Wolfman. I mean, how can you get better than the Wolfman? And here's the thing other people don't know about Chaney. He also was the Mummy. He was also Son of Dracula. So he did almost every monster that universe did. His father, Lon Chaney Sr., oh my God, Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame. I mean, now back then in the silent era, they didn't have the term horror, believe it or not. Horror started with Dracula and with Frankenstein. So I used to say that Lon Chaney Jr. used to play ugly leading men.
Yeah.
Because that's the best. Or in the TV Guide, I don't know if you remember this term, but in the TV Guide, they used to list these films as melodramas.
Okay,
To let you know it's going to be pretty heavy and serious. Lon Chaney Sr. developed lung cancer in 1930. They had planned Dracula for him, but he couldn't do it. He had died. Lugosi, they picked to do the Broadway show. He didn't even know the language, the English language. He had to learn the play by phonetically. So he would phonetically say the lines. So they were pressed. They didn't know who to get. And eventually they said, well, why don't we get the guy that's on Broadway? Bring him out and have him do it. So that's what happened. They brought him out. He did Dracula. It was released in February of 1931. It became such a huge success. Hollywood did what they even do today. They said, well, we got a hit here. Let's come up with another story. They wrote Frankenstein. Again, they looked for who's going to be in it. So the first one they went to was Lugosi. They said, you played the monster in Dracula. We want you to play the monster in Frankenstein. And Lugosi, probably the biggest mistake in his life, said, no, I'm an actor. I'm not going to wear makeup and grunt and groan. No, get somebody else. Well, that somebody else was Boris Karloff. And it turned his life around. Karloff came from England. His family was in the military service, and he had no desire to be in this at all. Fortunately, he inherited some money when he was 21. He flipped the coin, deciding to go to Canada or Australia, where they spoke English. He went to Canada, started in Montreal. For a decade, for 10 years solid, he was on stage. But he also built the sets. He took the tickets. He swept up. He did anything he could to be fed, including many, many times doing manual labor, digging ditches, driving trucks or whatever. Worked his way all the way over to Vancouver, eventually shot down to San Francisco. While he was acting on stage, somebody says, hey, why don't you go to LA? They got this new thing. It's called moving pictures. So he went down there, and that was it. That was the beginning. He made 80 motion pictures, and he was 44 years old before Frankenstein.
That's about right. Yeah.
I mean, a logical guy would have quit. It's not going to happen. He was literally going from movie to movie. I mean, he had no promise of anything after he finished the film. But one day, he's in the commissary. James Whale is there. James Whale notices him across the room, invites him over for tea. He says, you have a very interesting face. Would you like to test for the monster? He jumped at the chance. Because of Jack Pierce and Karloff and Whale, all three of them, they created this iconic look that will be with us for the rest of time. And he made Frankenstein, and it truly did turn his life and career around.
He really did, and there was a lot that I've heard about, just stories from the Frankenstein movie,
Right.
How difficult it was to put the prosthetics and the makeup on him. That was an hours-long job every day, wasn't it?
Well, Karloff was also responsible for the founding of the Screen Actors Guild.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why he felt strongly about it is when he made Frankenstein, he had to sit in that chair for 4 hours.
Okay,
So
right.
he would sometimes have to get there 3 a.m, 4 hours of makeup, and would not get paid until he stepped his foot on the soundstage.
Right.
So all that was his own time. Same
Mm.
thing when they took the makeup off. Same things when at one point in the scene in Frankenstein, instead of carrying a dummy up the hill, Whale insisted he carries Colin Clive up that hill in a long shot. That wouldn't make a difference whether it was a dummy, but
Yeah.
over and over again. And even though people think of Hollywood and glamours and parties and awards, it's difficult work. It's not easy making movies.
Oh, it's
And
not.
Karloff was aware of that. So when he had the chance to be a part of the Screen Actors Guild, he jumped at it, and his card was number 9. To
Oh,
let you know, yeah. So he used to hold meetings at his house, and he was very instrumental in getting that organization formed.
very interesting. Very interesting. Some of the other stories I had heard about, because I've had other folks that have a lot of expertise in this area on. He became very good friends with the little girl.
Yes.
I didn't know if you knew this story about him and the little girl. Had you heard about that?
Well, Greg Mank has told me many, many times. Her name was Marilyn Harris.
Mm-hmm.
Her mother, unfortunately, was the strictest stage mother, and
Yep.
just just cared more about her making money than anything else. When they went to film the scene, Karloff was hesitant because he was afraid that she would not, want to talk to him or be with him. But as soon as she came out, she ran over to him, held his hand, and said, "Can I drive in the car with you?" And that's when they drove up to the lake to do that scene. So yeah, they did. They had a nice relationship, and he also had a wonderful relationship with the guy that played or from Son of Frankenstein, Donnie Donegan, played the little boy in that, and they also were very close. Apparently, they played checkers or chess in between takes, and children loved Karloff. They really did. I had a chance to interview Sharon Moffat. Sharon Moffat was the little girl in The Body Snatcher, and they became close too. And she told some wonderful stories also. So children related to Boris Karloff as the monster, because I believe, because I felt this as a child, he was alone. Nobody wanted to be with him. He was shunned by society. And sometimes as a child, that's how you feel. You feel like you've got no friends. You feel like nobody's going to listen to you. So a lot of children would write to him and say that they loved his movie in Frankenstein.
Sure. So much is. That was such a. I guess those Universal movies were such game changers, because so much culturally, when we think of monsters and things like that, just came from that era. It's really amazing. The standards that they all set, and
yeah, it's really great. I mean, I'm sure they didn't start out this way, but it's wonderful to know that at one point MGM said, "You know what? We make musicals better than anyone else. That's what we're going to do." At one point, Warner Brothers said, "You know what? We make gangster films better. We're going to go with it." And Universal, and again, because of Carl Laemmle Jr., not Senior, but Jr., said we ought to make the monster movies. So he really was responsible for getting that going. And you're right. The care, the design, the writing, the acting, the music. Oh, the music. Well, again, Franz Waxman in Bride of Frankenstein. I mean, that goes without comparison. Just great stuff. They knew that they made monster movies better than anyone else. So that's what they did.
And they really did. They really did. And it went on for quite a while, the 30s, into the 50s, at least. They just did, it brought so much, so many legendary, iconic monsters, came from that area. And of course, there was always, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and
Right.
Dracula. But then there was, the Mummy was another one. Karloff was the Mummy at least once, I think, right?
Well, no, he was. Well, here's the funny
Oh
thing.
no, he was a character in the Mummy. He
Well,
wasn't
no,
the
no.
actual. No, was it? Wait a minute.
No, he was. He was in only one Mummy movie. But the Mummy, who I think is the weakest monster of all the monsters, there were like 5 Mummy movies.
That's
I
right.
couldn't understand, why would there be like the Mummy? I mean, the guy walks slow. All you got to do is run. You know,
Yeah.
five monster movies. But here's the nice thing. So all those great films were made in the 30s. Then in the 40s, you had the Wolfman, beautiful. And then in the 50s, that last guy that kind of got in, Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yes.
So he now became a part of that whole family. But that was made in the 50s, and that was about it for Universal.
That's true. That's true. And then, then we kind of went from the traditional monsters moving into the more sci-fi horror. The aliens coming down was more of a theme. I'm sure the Twilight Zone was kind of instrumental. You move into the 60s with the nuclear threat, the Red Scare,
right?
And then the 70s brought in the disaster movies as well as the nature movie. And by nature, I mean mutated animals or bigger than normal animals coming after people, which led to the slashers. And then,
Well, you're right about this country, but the monster movie did not go away thanks to England
Hammer.
and the Hammer movies, right? So Hammer really took up the mantle from Universal. They decided to go back, remake every film, but do it in color, have a little gore, have a little sex, and that did very well. And then, believe it or not, Roger Corman, the king of the drive-in movies, he went and he started making I Was a Teenage Werewolf, I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, and all these crazy, crazy movies, but they sold and people liked them. So, yeah, so it's great how one studio picked it up and another studio and so forth.
Right. Hammer was a big one with Peter Cushing.
Yes.
And I believe Christopher Lee.
Yep. Christopher
and
Lee.
The actor, Bill Sykes from Oliver.
Yeah.
Oliver Reed.
Right. Yes.
Another one. Those were great. That was back in the good old days with the bright red Corvette car paint blood is what I call it.
Yeah.
What wonderful times. What wonderful movies. I'm a big Svengoolie fan, if you probably guessed that. Svengoolie is another horror host. He's a nationally syndicated one. He's based in Chicago. I guess maybe not every market gets him, but he's got a Saturday night show just like the locals, where he would show a lot of Hammer, a lot of Universal, a lot of 70s disaster movies, and also shows the Ed Wood stuff with and then of course Mystery Science Theater 3000. They grabbed a lot of those things as well. The lower end ones, I'm thinking, though.
Well, and I enjoy those, but I really do like the originals.
Yes.
And again, like a guy like Zachary, and you got to realize this is the late 50s, early 60s. They were actually able to put him in the movie. And he was able to actually act. I mean, Svengoolie does it now too, but back then, to know you were the first and be able to be in the movie or make fun of it and all that, that was fun. And the same thing with the Twilight Zone. I mean, it was so original and so different. Nowadays, when you see a film, you go, all right, I see this coming. I see the twist. There's going to be something happening. And it's because you've seen it before.
Right.
But when they did it, it was the first time and it was great.
Absolutely. So a couple of other things I wanted to ask you real quick here was to kind of get your shameless plugs. This is the shameless plug portion of the program where you can shamelessly plug anything you would like to shamelessly plug with all shamelessness encouraged and no shamelessness spared. So let's hear it. Let's go for it.
Well, this Friday, I'm going to be at the Black Bear Film Festival in Milford, Pennsylvania. In fact, I'm kicking off the festival, and that's going to be on Friday the 14th. On Saturday, I will be at the Union County Performing Arts Center in Rahway, New Jersey. And again, both these places, we're going to screen the film, and then I will be there and do a question and answer. And then on the last weekend of October is the annual Chiller Theater Convention. This thing, Michael, is the longest and oldest, as far as you know, monster convention in the country. Kevin Clement runs it. Wonderful guy, and it's great. You see old movie stars, old TV stars, and you get to interact with them. You get to have autographs, take pictures, and it's great. And I will be there, probably visiting a lot of my friends. And here's the guy I'm visiting, which you may know. Do you know Dan Roebuck?
Yes. I've seen him in a lot of things, most recently as Grandpop Monster.
Yeah.
But yeah,
he's great. He's great, and he's going to be there. He's going to be at Chiller that weekend too. That's in Parsippany, New Jersey.
Oh, okay. I was just at ThunderCon up in where was that in New Jersey? Secaucus.
Okay, all right.
Well, outside of horror, I love The Office as well. So
I went to Wonderfest for the first time. Did you ever go to Wonderfest?
No. Unfortunately, when you perform, you got to miss the good stuff sometimes. And that's one of the things where other friends of mine that play music or do whatever, they're like, hey, come out and see. I'd love to come see you. I'm sure you'd love to come see me, but whenever we play, you play, I play, or I'm performing, you're performing, Okay, great. So give us the dates again for AddamsFest.
AddamsFest. Yeah, AddamsFest is in Westfield, New Jersey, and it will be the last weekend of October. If you go to AddamsFest.com, you'll be able to get there and find out everything that's going on. There's also a magazine out called Weird New Jersey. I don't know if you know about this or not, but there's a wonderful article this month about Addams family and the AddamsFest. So that's great. And then the Jewish Life Television, the first episode will air on Saturday, October 29th at 10:30. And you can see that either on your cable system or on the internet. And I'm just having fun. I mean, this is, I have like 12 lectures throughout the month talking about Boris Karloff and talking about Frankenstein. And I'm just loving it. I mean, this is the best time of year for me. And it's always great to talk to people like yourself that not only share in the love for this, but have this great knowledge about different things and can enjoy it, and we can talk about it.
I absolutely love the history. As I'd mentioned to you, when I was kind of telling you a bit about the show before we started recording, the purpose of the show was really to record history in the Mid-Atlantic area, where I've been a performer since the 80s.
Right.
And then I ended up expanding out. I met some people and ended up expanding out to Broadway and to Hollywood and New York and even overseas. And I just love the history, especially, the Catskills, old Hollywood, New York, Broadway, and even this area here, the nightclubs that were around, even ones from, the 50s, 60s, 70s that were big around, where I'm from. I absolutely just love hearing the stories and the history. And you've really given me some great ones to talk. You've really brought some great ones tonight. The Catskills, Groucho, Addams family, Boris Karloff, all these great things. And I just have really enjoyed having you. You got to promise me you're going to come see me again.
Oh, sure, absolutely. But I'll tell you what, here's what I'd like to close with. I'd like to close again just to state or restate how wonderful Boris Karloff was and his acting career. Here, what he did in a lifetime were three things that most actors would be happy to do just one, but he did three. First of all, he was the monster in Frankenstein, 1931, that will live on forever. So he will always be known for that film. In 1941, he starred in a role written just for him on Broadway in Arsenic and Old Lace.
Yes.
So he'll always be known for that. And finally, every Christmas, we all watch and listen to How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And he was the narrator and the Grinch in there. So to achieve all those three things, the man was nominated for a Tony. He won the Grammy and just had an amazing life and amazing career.
Absolutely. And one interesting piece of trivia. The singer of the Mr. Grinch song.
Well, Thurl Razencroft, something like that. Am I close?
Thurl Raisin or Rosecroft or something like that. He was the voice of
Tony the Tiger.
They're great.
And that was so sad. And it's, eventually they have corrected it. and people now kind of know it. But yeah, a lot of people think that's Karloff singing, but it's not. But and again, Chuck Jones. I mean, that we could go a half hour talking about that. But just a wonderful piece of just great writing and performing, and just a gem.
I know a lot of people have thought it was James Earl Jones singing.
Oh wow! Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So anyhow, well, look, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I mean, this has been a fascinating time, and I'd definitely love to have you come back, and maybe I've had a number of guests on here I think would make a great panel just to talk about horror movies and anything old Hollywood, really, because it seems like you definitely have vast knowledge even outside of that, or even the Catskills. I'd love to talk about the Borscht Belt sometime as well, even more in depth.
Well, what I'd love to do is come back and maybe just talk about film comedy and film comedians, because again, Jerry Lewis, big huge fan of Jerry Lewis, know a lot about his career. But again, there was Abbott and Costello and Laurel and Hardy, and just great films that were made. And yeah, film comedians would be a great topic.
Absolutely. Well, I think you and I are going to have plenty to talk about here, folks.
All right.
So most excellent. Well, folks, we appreciate you joining us tonight. Ronald MacCloskey, thank you again for coming and being on Fowl Players Radio tonight. And thank you all for listening. And we will see you next time. Take care. Well, folks, thank you again for tuning into this episode with Ronald MacCloskey. I mean, God, we had so much to talk about tonight, from Boris Karloff to AddamsFest to the Catskills to Groucho Marx. This was just a great episode. I really enjoyed recording it. I really hope you enjoyed these stories as well. Again, check us out, www.foulplayersradio.com, and all the websites where you can find Ronald's things are going to be in the show notes and everything. So make sure you go there and check it out. And thank you again for listening. We'll see you next time on Fowl Players Radio.